Welcome to the Society of Wetland Scientists webinar series. We're so glad you could join us today. My name is Latoya Kisoon-Charles, and I'm an assistant professor in biology at Missouri State University. I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's webinar. We're excited to share an SWS e-learning experience during a time when many of us are looking for virtual opportunities to stay engaged and gain some continuing education credits. This webinar is one way to stay connected to the wetland community during the global pandemic, and we hope everyone is well. Today's lecture and topic will be hands-on wetlands education with WOW, the Wonders of Wetlands Educator Guide. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Julia Beck and Tomi Bergstrom. Julia Beck serves as Vice President of Networks at Project Water Education Today, that is Project WET, which delivers quality education on our most important resource, water. She works with a dedicated and passionate global network of implementing partners who use Project WET in their programs. She provides resources and networking opportunities for partners, as well as writes curriculum, conducts training, and develops online trainings and lessons. Before taking her current position, she managed international projects for Project WET. She received a bachelor's in biology from Colorado College and a master's in wildlife biology from Montana State University in Bozeman. She has also worked as a wildlife biologist studying kit foxes, coyotes, and wolves, taught an outdoor science school, and traveled as a student of the world, including serving in the Peace Corps. Tomi Bergstrom is employed at the Watershed Improvement Branch, where she works with nonprofit volunteer organizations, environmental education partners, and citizens of West Virginia to inspire and empower people to value and work for clean water. She promotes and manages the Project WET program for the state of West Virginia and hosts free educational workshops for formal and informal educators and partners to host educational events across the state. Additionally, she promotes WIB and other DEP programs that educate, provide assistance, plan, and implement water quality protection, improvement, and restoration projects. Her goal is to educate, improve, and encourage local water heroes in communities and stress the importance of a healthy environment and clean water for West Virginians. Without further ado, I will now hand it over to Julia and Tomi. Welcome and thank you for being here with us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Latoya. Okay, get started here. Well, welcome everybody. I see a few familiar names that are in the participants, which is awesome. And I'm excited also to talk to people that I don't know, which is always exciting for me. So welcome and thank you for attending this webinar on our K-12 curriculum on WOW, or the Wonders of Wetlands. We call it WOW. Get things rolling. All right. So just a little bit about me. Thank you, Latoya, for that great introduction. My job with Project WET, or Water Education Today, is as the Vice President of Networks. And so what that means is that I get to work with our network of partners like Tomi, who implement the Project WET program all around the US and in the world. So Tomi works with West Virginia, and she is our point there, and I'll get into that a little bit more, as will she. But we have a wonderful network of partners everywhere, some of whom I see on this webinar, which is great. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can connect with them, if that's something you choose to do after learning more about this. So I'm going to talk just about 10 to 15 minutes and then turn it over to Tomi. I always like to start off with a little warm up. Project WET is a very interactive, hands-on organization, and we even like to keep our webinars that way and interact with you all. And then I'll touch on a little bit about who we are, about the WOW Educator Guide, how we work with our partners, and finally connecting to classrooms, where I will turn it over to Tomi, who will take it from there with the boots on the ground work that she does. So as mentioned, my background is in wildlife biology before Project Wet. So working as a scientist, and then I went into Peace Corps, and that is where I learned the true value of water. When you do not have access to clean water, you learn to appreciate it really quickly. And I also, although I'd been in education before that, really gained a new appreciation for education, because I really realized that that's where it all starts, right? That's where conservation happens. That's where sustainability happens, is when people are educated. So I came back from the Peace Corps and immediately got a job, well, almost immediately got a job with Project Wet, where I have been for 12 years, combining those two things, education and water. But most recently, I'm adding to my resume that I survived COVID with toddlers, and I'm still married to my wonderful husband here in Bozeman, Montana. So I feel pretty proud of that accomplishment as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and play a 1-minute video here that's going to introduce you to Project Wet and what we do, and then I'll take it from there.
Water. It's a vital ingredient for life on Earth. It grows our food, powers our industry. It keeps us clean and makes us happy. Life would not be the same without it. But our water is threatened by pollution, mismanagement, and Earth's changing climate. Project Wet, Water Education Today, provides the critical link between today's water stress and tomorrow's thriving communities through proven science and hands-on learning. Our goal is to advance water education to help address global challenges and inspire local solutions. Project Wet is for everyone. Educators and students of all ages use our lessons in their classrooms. Corporations rely on our practical approach to teach their employees the value of water and its inherent connection to STEM. Millions of people in 80 countries and all 50 states work with Project Wet each year. We envision a world in which action-oriented education enables a better understanding of the value of water, ensuring a sustainable future for all of us. We can't wait until tomorrow to better understand the value of water. We need Project Wet, Water Education Today.
All right, so that's just a brief summary of some of the things that we do and how we operate. A little more detail. We were founded back in 1984 in North Dakota, where our founder grew up on a farm there and did not understand why he had less water than farms down the road. And when he got older and learned more about glacial moraines and groundwater, he thought, well, gosh, if I had known that as a kid, I may not have had so many worries about water growing up. And so he created a program to teach about groundwater in the Western US originally. And Montana State University in Bozeman really liked that. So they brought him over to Bozeman, Montana, where that program grew organically, at first as the Western Water Course, and then later as Project Wet. And here we are in 2022, active in 50 countries, or sorry, 50 states and at least 80 countries, reaching millions every year. So it's a pretty, we also teach that more than just groundwater now, obviously, as well. So I like to get started with a little warm up, just getting you guys thinking. So you're not just sitting here staring at a screen, but also thinking about it. And what percentage of water on Earth do you think is potable? And I hope that I don't have to explain what potable is, but it means that we can use it for our needs. And I'll give you a hint that 97% of the water on Earth is in the oceans. So if you're able to use your chat box, go ahead and enter in what you think. So is it A, 2% of water on Earth, B, 0.5% of water on Earth, or C, 0.003% of water on Earth? And I'll give you guys a second to think about it. And the reveal. If you thought it was 0.003% of water on Earth, you are correct. We call it a drop in the bucket, which is an activity that is in our main guide, but also in this WOW guide. And I can send out a link later on with the link to our e-lesson for that, so you can check it out and learn a little bit more. All right, second brain teaser. Where is the majority of Earth's freshwater located? So we talked about the fact that freshwater is only 3% of water on Earth, But out of that 3%, where is most of it located? Is it in A, surface water, which is rivers and lakes, B, frozen in ice or glaciers, C, underground and groundwater? And I know our partners already know this, but if you said ice, you're correct. In fact, 80% of fresh water on Earth is frozen, right? So we're talking about 20% of fresh water, which if you want to keep track is 0.6% of all water on Earth. So that's what we're dealing with right now, is part of that when we're talking about wetlands. An important part though. All right, so how we work. We basically develop these hands-on inquiry-based lessons. So what that means is that students are engaging in these activities. They're doing something, they're active, right? And they're not just getting told the answers, they're figuring out the answers for themselves. They're discovering the answers through these lessons and activities. All of our lessons are general concepts that then are adapted to be place-based by our local partners. So Tommy's going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's the great thing about it. Anybody anywhere can pick up our lessons and use them and then adapt them to their local place. But maybe most importantly, they are fun. And that's incredibly important because people learn better when they are having fun. The research out there shows that when people are having fun, they retain information better. So we have these lessons that we create in our educator guides. We have different topics. We're talking about the wetlands one today, but we also have climate change, and we have floods, and we have an early childhood guide, right? So different types. We have these activity booklets. We have one on wetlands that are self-paced, that students can go through with activities. And we have digital resources as well. And basically we roll these out through our network of partners who train educators in their area to use these lessons in their various educational programming. And then I briefly just want to mention as well that we have corporate partners. And these corporate partners tend to be customized programs. It's something we make specifically for them, but it's something they use either in their employee engagement or they get trained and then go out into their communities and work with students there as well. So with this educational experience, we have our publications with these lessons and activities that we couple with the hands-on trainings with our partners that are fun and experiential. And then we provide supportive resources so that any educator who is trained can get what they need for their programs and their audience. We operate through a train the trainer model. So in 2021, we actually educated around 2.9 million people worldwide in water on various topics of water. And we did that through our network of partners. So I work with our what we call coordinators. These are the people that are the point person at our partner institutions. Tomi is one of those, and making sure that these people have the resources they need. But then people like Tomi will go out and they're going to train their own trainers should they need them. And those people as well, they go together and they train educators to use the Project Wet materials in either their classrooms or education centers with whatever their student audience is, and they do that year after year. So who are these educators that we work with? Well, we consider an educator anybody who educates. So that could be corporate as well. But generally, we're talking about formal. So that's pre-K through 12 classrooms, formal schools. Also non-formal. So this could be anything from, water utilities to nature centers, to museums. This is one of our facilitators who works in a national park, right? And we work with pre-service students. So pre-service students are those people training, they're going to school to become teachers. So we want to make sure before they hit the workforce and before they're hired as in a teaching position, that they are trained in Project Wet and ready to educate about water as soon as they start. And then finally, of course, the end user is the students, the ones that we educate through the teachers on water. The end goal, no matter who we're working with though, is to make water science relatable, to make it fun, right? So instead of showing a chart of the water cycle and making kids memorize evaporation and percolation and precipitation and all these big words, instead we have kids transform into a water drop and run around, in their own journey on the water cycle and seeing how water moves from different places and exploring those state changes. Instead of just talking about point source pollution or non-point source pollution, we have a fun activity that takes people through it. And then at the end, there's a big aha reveal to help them understand it, right? So these are the type of fun things we do. We take these big concepts like stream integrity and biodiversity and break it down into a fun activity. And then kids get to look at the bugs to check it out. So that's our expertise. And with the wetlands guide, we do that with wetland topics. And Tomi will talk about that more specifically. Just some background on it. It was published in 1995. It's co-published with Environmental Concern. We have 44 lessons in there, including a whole section of background information for teachers, planning guides by grades. And most recently, through Tomi's efforts, we correlated 20 of those lessons, or around 20 lessons, to the next generation science standards, which is incredibly important when working in formal classrooms. So, big picture here. Imagine if learning about water was a part of school's curricula everywhere. Imagine if every child came out of their education, their schooling, understanding their watershed that they lived in, understanding the wetland next door to them or at their school, understanding where their water comes from that they drink and where it goes when they're done with it, right? These are not things that are required right now in school. And that is the big picture. That's our dream. But that can't happen unless we can really connect to the classroom, connect to teachers. And we do that by making sure we're meeting teacher requirements. So this is for formal educators. And that's why those standards are so important. We make sure we correlate our lessons to educational standards so that teachers can prove to their administrators and curriculum coordinators that they're meeting their requirements, that it's going to fit with their curriculum. And that means not making them do extra work. We also make sure it's place-based through our partners, and Tomi will talk about this. Connecting to local waterways. Most schools, well, I don't know about most, but a lot of schools have wetlands right either next to them or on their school grounds. And then also making sure there's project-based options, right? Like they could do a research project right there. They can engage in real world experiences through water. Water is very real world, it's very tangible. And then lastly, a really great way to do this is field trips, right? So having those combining the formal and non-formal, having teachers come out to a site and check it out, and then having the non-formal educators trained in Project Wet leading activities. That happens a lot with our partners and is a great way to get kids out in the outdoors. So with that, it's time to dive in, put our boots to the ground, and I'm going to turn it over to Tomi, who's going to talk about how this really works out there in the real world. I will, of course, be available for questions at the end, and of course, to contact me should you have any questions about any of this, and we will send out these presentations as well.
Right, thank you, Julia. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
All right, wonderful. Let me just get one thing pulled over here. Okay. All right, wonderful. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tomi Bergstrom. Thanks for the introduction from everybody. I work with the Department of Environmental Protection here in West Virginia as the Western Watershed Basin and Project Wet Coordinator. And I work within a lovely group called the Watershed Improvement Branch, and we're doing great things, and we work with the best people in West Virginia. But today, I'm going to narrow my focus to talk to you about wetlands as outdoor classrooms. So we're going to do a little warm up because I find warm ups to be incredibly important. We'll look at how wetlands are learning sites. We'll go through several different hands-on lessons, and then I'll show you some case studies from here in West Virginia. After that, Julia and I will be happy to answer any questions. So to get us started, everybody can use their chat box now, and I just would like to take a pulse of everybody that's on the webinar with us. What wetland animal mood are you in today? Are you kind of having a snappy turtle day? Are you having a grumpy toad day? Are you a happy salamander? I would say today, I'm a happy salamander. Why? Because tomorrow is Friday. All right, so we have several 5s and 9s, 8s and 1s. I love seeing people say what mood that they're in. Wonderful. Well, thank you for participating in that. And that this is just getting us thinking about some of the animals that may be living in wetlands too. So some quick background information on me that is relative to what we're talking about today is that I grew up in this incredible area called Canaan Valley. If you've ever been there in West Virginia, I'd love for you to say in the chat box, hey, I've been there before. It's wonderful. This is home to one of our largest wetland complexes in the state. And it's just absolutely where my heart lives. I went to Marshall University then and studied biological sciences. And I got into herpetology, which I had never heard of and didn't know much about. But I ended up writing my thesis on anurine calls, which was really fun, really interesting. And then I went to work on wildlife restoration projects, maybe my dream job, if you will. But then my career changed, as they do. And I started working with watershed improvement projects and water education. And the really cool thing about everything that I've done in my life is that it all ties back into water. And it just shows you how water truly connects us across this planet. So let's do a little bit more warming up about wetlands. And I do this with students all the time. And if you're in a position where you can't take them out to a wetland, you can always take a video of one and then bring it to them virtually. So I'm going to play a little video here from Green Bottom Swamp Wildlife Management Area. It's a lovely wetland that's nestled along the Ohio River floodplains. And I want you just to chat, put in the chat box some different sounds that you hear. What can you observe? What are you seeing? And how do you think you might define a wetland just from this video? All right, did anybody hear anything? Right, some wildlife habitat, some bird habitat. Yeah, I can hear the wind too. And at the very beginning, there's some frogs calling as well, a little bit hard to hear those. So just looking at this picture, you may think, okay, wetlands normally have some water in them. They have a bunch of different plants, and I can hear that they have a pretty diverse wildlife involved as well. So another thing that we do to warm up about wetlands is you can play a video or take them out, have them close their eyes and listen. But also you can just take a piece of paper and jot down a pros and cons list. Now this is pulled from our WOW, the Wonders of Activity guide. There's many different warm-up activities that they have depending on where you're at and what age group you're working with. But whenever I do this activity with students, before we go into other activities, I get a lot of really funny responses, and they're usually a lot of cons because maybe they don't know that much about wetlands yet. And so they associate them with being wet, which is a gross thing. Most people do not like to get their feet wet, especially maybe in water where they can't see all the way down to the bottom. So it's a comfort issue. They may also say that they're muddy and smelly, which I love the smell of wetlands, that not everybody does. A lot of people have fear of bugs, and then also what might be down in that grass. So snakes and bears, things like that. So the con list is usually pretty large whenever we first start into these activities, because there's a lot of fears associated with being in an outdoor environment. And so exposing the students to an outdoor environment is going to just overall make them more comfortable, but also it gives you the opportunity for this pro list to grow. So while you're at home, feel free, you can create your own list if you'd like, and we will revisit this in a moment. So wetlands as learning sites. Of course, if you have ever been to a wetland, you know that they're very powerful places to learn in. They're very intense, dynamic activity. There's life everywhere. Just from that short video, we heard many different bird calls. We saw some flying. You could see insects moving around. So we can tell there's a lot of life there. And usually a neat thing about wetlands is that they were one of the last areas to be settled because they're wet. So they kind of retain that last wild and pristine landscape within a community. They're often nestled around urban and suburban settings. Now in West Virginia, this is not always true because we have a pretty low population compared to other states. But even in areas like DC, where there's a lot of pavement, there are still wetlands, and all around them are people. And so they have an opportunity to go and explore and learn from these habitats that are right next door to them. These compact areas also illustrate major ecological concepts. So it's very easy to talk about the food web when you can really see it all around you. It's really easy to talk about the hydrological cycle when you're standing in it and seeing the fog lift from the pools and the ponds and evaporate into the air. So they're just really wonderful areas to demonstrate these concepts. And of course, wetlands have ecosystem services. And I don't have to tell you all that because I'm sure you already realize it. Of course, they can provide an outside classroom, tons of recreation, they control floods, they purify water, they hold carbon, and so much more. But how do we actually teach that to students? And that is where this Wow, the Wonders of Wetland guidebook comes in. These lessons are hands-on, and just like Julia said, they're project-based, solution-based learning. So let's get into it. One of my favorite activities to do is called wetland metaphors. I love this because all I need is a bag with some supplies in it, and I can talk to anybody about wetlands. I love to do this. So this is for first grade through 12th grade. It can take however long you want, however short you want. But essentially, you have a bag with different items in it, and they refer back to a wetland to some capacity. And you can localize this to a certain wetland if you even wanted to. So I have this bag and I'm going to pull an item out, and I'd love for you to interact with me in the chat box and say how this object relates back to a wetland. So what I pulled out is a cradle. So how do you think this object could represent what a wetland is or does? And I'll give you a moment to drop some answers. Okay, I see wildlife nursery, nursery for creatures and fish. All right. Talking to the right people, I can tell. It provides a nursery that shelters, protects, and feeds young wildlife. Yes, wonderful. So when the students actually pull this item out, it challenges them to think about it in a different way. How does a nursery relate to a wetland? How does a cradle relate to a nursery? Wonderful job. Our next item is a strainer. So how do you think a strainer represents what a wetland is or does? Filters, filtration. Yes, wonderful. It will strain silt and debris from water, helps keep our water supply clean. Right, this one always gets the young kids because they're like, my grandpa takes that. So you might want to use this one just if you're working with a little bit older students, but antacids, how do they represent what a wetland is or does? Buffers, okay. Yeah, this one's a little bit trickier. So they help to neutralize toxic substances. And we could go on with this, but this was the first one I'll stick with. Some of these have multiple answers. All right, and one more. A pillow. How do you think a pillow represents what a wetland is or does? Okay, some people are saying it's a home. Yeah. That's a great answer. Gives animals a place to rest. I like that. Yeah, both of those are correct. It's a refuge. Wonderful. Yes, it provides a resting place for migratory birds. And again, these can have multiple answers. It opens up discussion so you can talk to your students a little bit more about these really important wetland functions. So after I do this activity, I love to go back to my board of my pros and my cons. Okay, we know wetlands can be smelly and muddy and snaky and all that stuff, which is a little scary sometimes, but they're also a place where baby animals live. Wow, how cool is that? They strain and filter our water. Oh, that's awesome. And it's a resting place for migratory birds. So my pro list is beginning to look pretty good. And again, at home, feel free to add to your list if you're new to this. Another activity that I do with usually middle school and high school students is wetland habitats. This is a wonderful activity because it simplifies a really complex issue, which is dichotomous keys. So if you just jump right out of the gate and hand a student a dichotomous key and ask them to key out something, they may be totally lost. And you do have to use these keys a lot whenever you're looking at plants and animals and other things. So this is a way to introduce them to it in a way that's not intimidating, that they will understand, and they're learning about wetland habitats. So I usually start off by showing them some photos of different wetlands here in West Virginia. And I ask them, are wetlands always wet? Because we think that in order to be a wetland, it must have open water in it year round, right? Well, not necessarily. And so this activity dives into this a little bit more. So we talk about how they're classified. By looking just at these pictures, we can tell that the plant life is different in all of them. Some of them have water present. Some of them don't have that much water present. So let's go ahead and flip over here and look at our chart. So this is the chart that we use that's from the guidebook. It's really simplified to classify these different wetland habitats. And you can tell we're going to be looking at what type of water is there and what type of plants are there, and then also the substrate. So this is an example of one of our cards. So I'll just read it out loud. You can follow along with me. So this wetland habitat is scrubby, has low growing thickets of shrubs that grow there and places that may have started out as wet meadows. You might find these places near the coast or where lakes, streams, rivers, marshes, and forested swamps overflow. They are not always covered with water. This type of wetland offers good habitat for fish, reptiles, amphibians, and many other animals. So then the students, usually working in groups, they will take that card and they will work through this flow chart. So first, is the land sometimes covered with water or always? This one is sometimes covered. Next, we're looking at what type of water is it? Is it tidal or not tidal? This water is not tidal. After that, we start looking at the plant life that lives there. Is it trees, shrubs? Does it have a spongy floor? What's going on with it? It has mostly shrubs. And so that takes us over to a shrub swamp. So again, this key, super simple, but it really gets them thinking and looking at what types of plants live there, what the water is like, and even introducing some soils to them. And this all leads into wetland biodiversity. So if you're working with a little bit older students, you can just hop from that activity right over into a plethora of other ones that we have on wetland biodiversity, looking at adaptations, looking at the cellular structure of the plants that live in these wetland environments, and more. But before we get going too far down that road, let's say that instead you're working with a group of second graders or fourth graders or fifth graders, and you're not going to be getting into those wetland habitats and flow charts. So you might do this activity instead. It's called Who's Clues, and you really don't need anything except for a wetland setting to do it. So this is a great activity to do with K through 12, and it can last as long or as little as you would like it. So I usually give all of my students survey flags. Sometimes I'll break them into groups and I just send them out into the wetland. Now, if you're working with real young students, you might want to designate a zone that they are to wander around in so you don't just lose them in the cattails. But you have them go out and investigate and look for signs of life. Are there spider webs? Is there a place where the grass was pushed down? And even beforehand, depending on their age, I'll show them scat molds and footprint molds so they can get familiar with some of those prints. And we talk about the scat too and how it relates to the health of the animals. So without further ado, let's go explore out in this wetland. I had a little boy find this and he was so excited because it was a real animal that had been eaten by another animal, which got them really excited, you know. So what type of animal do you think left this behind? So our group comes over, we're looking at it, we're discussing it, and it could be several different things because there's a lot of predators that live in wetlands. But then we found these foot tracks. So if you know what animal this is, feel free to put it in the chat box as we go along through here. A trash panda, that is correct. A raccoon was here. So they had a meal and then they went and got some water too. So even though we don't see that animal, the students now learned this animal was here at some point. This one might make your blood pressure rise a little bit, depending. But does anybody recognize the scat of this animal? We find lots of different scats, and sometimes we even dig into them a little bit and check them out with gloves, of course. All right, this one is a Canadian goose. If you've ever stepped in it, you'll remember. Yes, their trademark, their scat. These are always so cool to find. The students get really excited if they find one of these. A crayfish, yes, a crayfish burrow. So we can find their home there, just like if you found a beaver dam. You're probably not going to see the beaver unless you're there at night, but you might see their dam and it tells you, hey, this animal lives here. How about this one? Everybody should get this. What does this tell you? If you find a tree, yes, a beaver lives here. That's right. And of course, since I study frog calls, let's do one that you don't see, but maybe you hear. Anybody recognize this animal? That is our American bullfrog. That's right. If you want to see him, oh, they're so cool. So sometimes we hear things too. We might hear the birds calling or the frogs calling, and we know that they're present. So those are clues as well. As a wrap up to this activity, you can have your students create their own mud print poster showing what their track looks like, or as a group, you can have them take notes of all the animals that they saw there today, so they can record what lives in this wetland that they are visiting. So of course, we went through several different activities there that are easier to present online without having you all out in a wetland with me, but know that there are many, many, many others. And I'm not going to read that paragraph of stuff to you, but we have many demonstrations that we do with our body. So we mimic the flow of water through something. There are soil charts in there, and everything is broken down to a grade level form so that students can actually understand what you're trying to talk about. So it teaches you the little words to use instead of our big words and all of our acronyms. And there's so much value just to getting them out in a wetland and allowing them to explore. So some case studies from West Virginia. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some summer STEM camps that we did, our wetland workshops for educators, and our educational outreach events here in West Virginia. So there are tons of words on here, and I apologize for that, but during our week-long summer STEM camps, I hosted 3 of them this year with partners across our state. And you might notice that right here in the middle, this whole day is just about wetlands because they're so valuable and there's such wonderful classrooms to take the kids out into. So during the morning, we would cover different activities from the guidebook, and then we would take them out to actually visit a wetland in person. And several of these students had never been to one before. They had a lot of fears about maybe going there. And then pretty soon they're the ones saying, Miss Tomi, I see a frog over here. I just saw it hop in the water. Or they start to notice the difference between sedges and rushes because we're showing them the real plant that they can roll between their fingers. So this was highly valuable. And we also had the students pick plants, of course, with the permission from the wildlife management area. We tried to get some of the invasives out. And we had them make boats out of the wetland plants. And this is another activity from our guidebook. In addition, we also did water quality sampling. And so just lots of resources in this guidebook that you can easily integrate into a STEM camp. With our wetland workshops for educators, these are usually hosted at a wetland setting. Why? Because we want to, show the teachers exactly what it is we're talking about. These are usually about 6 hours long, and they receive the WOW, the Wonders of Wetland guides as part of the workshop. And in West Virginia, we wrote a EPA wetland development grant and received it. And so this fall, and then also next spring, I'm going to be doing some workshops where we also fit the teachers with resources. So they are getting hand lens, scalpels, soil pH kits, water pH kits, field guides, and much more. So we're able to train them in this curriculum, give them the resources that they need. We host the workshop at their local wetland, and so they are ready to go. So this is an agenda from just my workshop. Everybody does them a little bit differently. But one thing I think we all do is that we bring in local wetland specialists. So this is Nick Murray with our watershed assessment branch. You know, he's having a great time, and I wish I would have zoomed in on this lady's face right here. She is totally out of her comfort zone. This teacher is not comfortable with him holding this muddy stuff in his hands. And that's what it's all about. If the teachers aren't comfortable taking their students there, they're not going to go. So we take them out with us, get them comfortable, and then they can bring their students out. So as a result of these workshops, educators experience the value of a wetland. Maybe they themselves have not visited one. They become familiar with a local one so that they can bring their class to it, or they can visit it themselves. They become empowered and motivated to bring their students there. And one of the most important things is that teachers and students become a voice for their local wetland. In addition to these educational outreach events, I have developed a wetland planning guide, and this was part of the wetland development grant that I mentioned earlier. So we have a whole guide that you can download. This is not totally specific to West Virginia. It could be used in any state. So if you're interested to see how WOW and event planning can go together in your state, you can check this out. This is our Wild and Wonderful Wetland events. So I just wanted to mention that. And we also use these material at many other outreach events, such as water festivals. So water festivals are just like this last planning guide I showed. They're outside events where we have several different stations that are hands-on activities that the students rotate through, usually around 25 minutes. And we have different water resource professionals that will work these tables. People trained in the Project Wet curriculum will work these tables. And so I love to have at least one of those booths be a wetland station. We also do tabled outreach events. So you can see here, this little person here with this cool hat on is making a boat. So I just stopped along the road, cut down some of our invasive cattail that we had, and took it in my vehicle and cut it into slices so that they could develop their own boat. And we had some really cool designs that came as a result of this. And at this STEM event, our table was so busy because the kids were just so into playing with these plants. And the funniest thing is that they could not believe that the plant was floating. So while they were building their boats, I'm plugging them with information about how plants have adaptations and how cattails are specially adapted to live in a wetland setting. So they're just learning so much just by letting them play with pieces of cattails and building a boat. We also do a World Wetlands Day video series each year for World Wetlands Day. So you can check those out on our Environment Matters YouTube channel. And that is our DEP YouTube channel. So finally, these are just some pictures I wanted to throw in of all the cool little critters I get to see when I'm out and about. And thank you all so much for your attention today and for being interested in using our WOW curriculum guide and just doing wetland education. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here. And then I guess if you have any questions, we can go ahead and answer those for you.
Thank you, Tomi. Thank you, Julia. That was a really fun presentation. I really like the interactiveness of it. Again, for those tuning in, I'll be posing your questions and maybe a few of my own. I will just need you to type your questions in the Q&A, and I will read those out aloud. The most popular questions that have been upvoted to the top will be read first. If you forgot to ask a question or you have to leave before the Q&A is over, you can email the presenter at the email addresses on the screen here. Alrighty, let's get started. So go ahead and start posting some questions in the Q&A there for us.
I see a question about that I absolutely love, that I'll answer right now, that what came to us, the panelists, is the WOW guide going to be updated, and or how would an organization go about helping to update the WOW guide? We, as I mentioned, it was published in 1995, and we have not been able to update it much since then. I think we may have made a few like little error tweaks in subsequent publishings, but we want to update it desperately, and basically it's funding. So if an organization can either provide funding or maybe help, sometimes we can pool different organizations' fundings. If like, 5,000 here, 10,000 there that people can provide, that's happened before, then we'd be able to update it. But that's basically the holdup. And so we are all for it. Thank you for asking that.
So there's a question here. Is there a Spanish version of the guide?
No, there's not. But again, with funding, we can translate that. Or if somebody has the means to translate it, then we can work with you on that. Yeah, it's usually, most of these answers are with funding, we can do it because we are a nonprofit. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link now to our partners map. So if anybody's interested in connecting with one of our local partners, not all of our partners are do workshops on the WOW guide. So I'll put that out there. We are a 501c3. Thank you. But yeah, so anyway, if you're interested in connecting with one of our partners, you can find them there. You can also email me directly, and I'm happy to put you in touch. I know we have a number of partners that are on here, and feel free to pipe up or say anything if that's something you'd like to do as well.
There's another question here that was in the chat. Where do you get most of your funding? Is it grants or is it agency support?
I can answer first, and then it'll be different for Tomi. We are a 501c3. Our funding varies from year to year. Right now we have some government grants coming through. We partner with corporations, as I mentioned earlier, and that provides a lot of funding for us. In recent years, we do private donations, so year-end campaign. We've had in the past philanthropists. So yeah, it varies a little bit from year to year. And Tomi.
Yeah, so we have state and federal funding. I work very closely with the non-point source program here at DEP. So we have some funding from that we can apply for. Otherwise, most of my funds come from state funds. That being said, we also apply for grants. So we applied for EPA's Wetland Development Grant. So almost all of our stuff is either through direct funding as part of our work here, or grants that we are applying for.
Okay. There is another question here. Does the WOW curriculum provide policy exercises for older students, for example, management, WOTUS, etc.?
So I can answer just a little bit about that one first. There's a wonderful activity that I love to do called Hear Ye, Hear Ye, and it goes through a mock public hearing. And it's so cool for older students because it pulls in all these different careers that are out there, and it shows what actually happens when somebody wants to go in and build on top of a wetland, and how it's not always as simple as like, don't do that, or yes, do it. And how, you have to think about the community, the people that might need to live in that building, the regulatory side of things, the mitigation side of things. And so we have several activities within the guidebook that touch on policy that students can use to learn about these really complex careers. And, nobody's reading policies before they go to bed at night. Like, it's pretty in-depth. So the activities are really good to help you get a foot in with your students and keep their interest, but teaching them also about these subjects. And Julie, you might have other things to add to that.
No, I am not the wetlands expert. This is why I pulled in Tomi.
which I'm not an expert either. You know,
Okay.
we
A
all
WoW user.
we rely on our very lovely network to do everything that we do.
Okay, just a reminder, guys, to post your questions in the Q&A. Is there any questionnaire or survey to K-12 about the course?
I'm not sure I entirely understand that question. You mean like an I'm wondering if this person means an assessment. There are questions, correct me if I'm wrong, almost all of our guides have like assessment ideas at the end and a warm-up, but I don't have any specific assessment for this guide. We tend to let people create their own because it is customized. People adapt them for their different locations, and that can vary. But there may be some out there somewhere that another organization provides. Yeah.
Can you go over general process for recruiting and engaging new partner or WET coordinators?
Yeah, and I see the next question relates to that too. So I would look on our map. If we have a coordinator in the state, they are the person to talk to, because we tend to partner with just one partner in a state. That varies a little bit depending on the state, especially larger ones. Texas, we have multiple partners, but you know, you can become a facilitator organization, which is really honestly almost the same thing, except that you have to do a little less work in terms of reporting to us. And so I would just look at our map. You can contact me if you're confused, and I'm happy to put you in touch. And if we don't have somebody there, then yeah, we're happy to start the discussion of partnering. The only requirement is that you have the capacity to run the program and that you are an organization and not an individual. And so if you're located in Wisconsin, as I see Darian asked, just go to the map. We do have a partner there. If you're having problems connecting, please reach out to me.
There was a question in the chat I think we skipped over. Do you have volunteer opportunities?
I think you should just reach out to me directly if you're talking about volunteering with us. It's a little tricky because we're a national program and we're not the boots on the ground as much as like our partners are. So if you're more interested in working with teachers and students directly, you probably want to contact the local partner. I work with all of our coordinators like Tomi and the rest of our network throughout the US, and I don't always get out to the field.
Okay, we still have time for more questions. Did I miss anyone that typed a question in the chat? Oh, here's one. What has been the biggest challenge for your program in the last 5 years?
Tomi, I'll let you answer that first.
Well, COVID, obviously. Yeah, trying to just what I did today. I'm adapting a wetland setting to something virtual. That is incredibly difficult to do. So we have all been working on this a lot. How do we still take people outside without actually meeting them outside? I think that's probably been the hardest thing to overcome. Funding is always an issue. I think nonprofits got hit incredibly hard. States got hit incredibly hard. So I'm sure Julia can tell us more about that, but we, you know, we had to do a lot of changing quickly in order to meet the needs of the people that we work with. So there was a lot of critical thinking happening instead of us just churning through what we're used to doing. So it made you really stop and pause and think about how we can improve this. And I think as a result of coming out of the last 5 years, that we have some really awesome programs now that we did not have before. So we got forced into learning new ideas and new approaches to teach this to people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, COVID is the no-brainer. That's by far was the biggest challenge, and you know, and then funding, of course. But it was in the education world, and I know not everybody on this webinar is in the education world, but in the education world, it was everything got thrown up in the air, turned into a blender, thrown out the back door, and all of a sudden, all of our resources that are these hands-on together group things didn't work for 2 years. And so we had to kind of recreate things and yeah, again, get creative. And that drop in the bucket lesson that I put up in the chat is a great example of some of the things that we now offer virtually online. We always prefer to be together and go out, but you know, sometimes we can't do that, and we still want people to be able to learn the importance of water wherever they are and meet them where they are. So yeah, it's been a lot, but we do now have a library of digital resources. We have ways to get our resources out there digitally. We have ways to do webinars like this that we didn't often do before. So that's the blessing. And I would say that that is also the success, is coming out the other side of this and having people more excited than ever to like get into hands-on learning again.
What about biggest successes?
I think those go hand in hand. The challenge isn't overcoming them.
Yeah, and I would also add on to that this summer has been one of my busiest summers ever, because everybody is just so excited to get back outside again, and they're just like, how do we do this? You know, and then Tomi, help us. Can you come train us? Can you meet with us? You know, do you have somebody we can work with? And so we've been, you know, growing our network here in West Virginia, and I'm sure other states are incredibly similar, so that we can provide assistance for teachers taking students back outside again, because some of them, maybe they just started into the profession, they haven't done it, they need guidance, they need support. And that's exactly what Project Wet is here for.
Thank you. I think maybe we have time for one more question. You've shared a lot of links in the chat, and I think we'll probably try to share those with the attendees so people have access to them.
Yeah, and I'll put them into my presentation in a slide too, because we'll share that out.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tomi and Julia. That was a lot of fun, and it was very informative. So thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today. And then also, we're proud to recognize our SWS webinar series sponsors, and we'd like to thank them as well: the Whittington Group, WildNote, Delta Land Services, and In Situ. You can find our information at the websites listed. Please visit, like, and follow our SWS webinar sponsors. Our next set of webinars, we have a Spanish language webinar, which will be on September 21st, and we'll be joined by Dr. Fabian Alejandro Rodriguez Zaragoza for a presentation on biodiversity and ecosystem functioning of coral reefs. And then our next English language webinar will be on October 20th with Dr. Andy Nyman, who will discuss the history of wetland management practices. So check out our website and social media channels to learn more and register for upcoming events. And then don't forget to complete the survey that will be sent to you after this webinar to receive a certificate of participation and provide feedback on this webinar series. Thanks again to Tomi and Julia, really appreciate it. And thank you to those attending the webinar today. Thank you for participating. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thursday and stay well. Bye.